In a dismal future, a blazing neon light from the past cuts a pathway toward tomorrow. Bounding into comics and Brett R. Smith present Escape from the Future.
Welcome to Escape from the Future, brought to you by Bounding into Comics. I'm your host and comic veteran, Brett R. Smith. Joining me today is a very talented comic book creator and a good friend, Eric Weathers. Eric is an independent comic artist and letterer. He's also the co-creator and artist of the self-published series Flying Fortress and Battle Brick Road. Eric has lettered for several independent comic book publishers, such as All Caps Comics, Allegiance Arts and Entertainment, Iconic Comics, the Rippaverse, Splato Comics, and many others. Great to see you, brother. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, thanks, Brett. Happy to be here.
So most people know you as a letterer for many independent comics and graphic novels. You letter a lot of books for creators, including being the lead editor at Rippaverse. I think what some might not know is you're also a very talented penciler and inker. The cover artwork and interior artwork on Battle Brick Road is all you, and it's very solid work. For those that might have missed your past books and campaigns, go ahead and tell our viewers what Battle Brick Road is all about.
In short, Battle Brick Road is Wizard of Oz with guns. It's Wizard of Oz for boys. Mm-hmm. I came up with the idea several years ago and pitched it to a friend of mine who's a writer by the name of Zib Hatfield. Mm-hmm. And basically, it's a near future post-apocalyptic sci-fi retelling of the Wizard of Oz. We sort of stripped away the magic and the whimsy of it and the childness of it. Mm-hmm. And injected it with a lot of high action, a lot of interesting sci-fi things, a lot of just sort of making it its own unique retelling. You know, mm-hmm. We've got Thea Gale is on a quest to find her dad, who she lost 20 years in the past, and that takes her on this quest, on this mission to find Oz when she find some friends that can maybe help her in her mission. And Oz is controlled by 4 AI constructs, the 4 Watchers, which are our versions of the 4 witches. And they each control a sector, northeast, south, and west. And east and west went a little bit rogue. And Thea falls into this world sort of after this. She's arriving in this. It's an aftermath of some great cataclysm, some great war that has happened, and she's just trying to find her place in all this and how to get to wherever her dad is. And it's just sort of a fish out of water story.
You mentioned it's Wizard of Oz for boys with guns. There's not much made for boys these days, it seems like.
That's true.
So yeah. I love the fact that, because that's a demo that most people, like I said, aren't really trying to cater to. So I think that's a great idea, because there's so little for boys.
Yeah.
So lots of action, I would imagine.
Absolutely. That's the best part about it, I think, is getting those action scenes to rewrite and just tell some fun stories in this world.
Yeah. So I love this alt cover by Kelsey Shannon. This is just so gorgeous.
Yeah.
Absolutely love
Knocked
this
it out
one.
of the park.
Yeah, so you and I did one as well. This was a tough one. I mean, I obviously love our cover the best, but I think this is the second best. Maybe tied with the one that John Malin and I did as well, which is also a lot of fun to work on. I hadn't worked with John, I don't think, since Jawbreakers, when I colored this. Mm-hmm. And I love what he did with the Emerald City. It's just so expansive and cool looking. And I love the smoke,
Yeah, he's a great, his compositions are always out of the park. I mean, they're really, really good. So
yeah, he's a great layout artist. And then this was one that you and I did. I love this. And I wasn't even aware that you were a penciler until you sent this to me to color. And it's this is one of those pieces when you're a colorist and you get the line art that you just love, because it was completely open. You've always got a battle sequence here, but this background was basically kind of left up to me to fill in the blanks. And I think I gave you sort of an overall idea of what I wanted to do, which was smoke and fire and explosions and sparks, and just basically like a big battle sequence. And this was a lot of fun putting together. And your pencils are beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, you really you really brought this cover to life. You did a wonderful job.
Thanks, man. Thanks. I mean, it's like, as a colorist, you hope to elevate the pencils and inks and plus them,
Mhm.
as Walt Disney used to say. And I think we hit it out of the park on this one. It turned out really
I
nice.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So the characters are just killer, and it's just got all kinds of kind of energy to it that I think is a lot of fun. Kelsey's as well. I love this. I loved all the forced perspective here. I just think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
They're jumping off the page. They're
yeah.
jumping off the cover in that one.
Yeah. Characters look great too. You designed all these?
I did. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. It's great pencils. And who's your colorist on the interiors?
The interior colorist is Vinicius Townsend.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great looking book, and I think it's an interesting retelling of, obviously a classic story, sort of an American icon in a lot of ways. Even though I read recently that Wizard of Oz apparently did not do well in the theaters. It's basically kind of, in a lot of ways, sort of a cult film, which I did not
Honestly, I don't know. I didn't know that either. I know that it was very expensive to make.
Yes.
It was
Yeah.
extremely expensive to make, but I
Yeah.
wasn't sure about its box office numbers.
So, and then while we're on your website, most people crowdfund using Indiegogo, Kickstarter. You're using your own site. Tell us
Mhm.
about that.
Yeah, well, I've used Indiegogo and Kickstarter in the past, and I think they're
Mhm.
great platforms for people trying to get anything crowdfunded.
Mhm.
It's sort of exactly what they're there for. But when it came time for Battle Brick Road 2, we had been noticing some shadow banning happen on certain campaigns where like you could search for it and it wouldn't come up in the search. You had to have like a direct link to it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, and even sometimes they wouldn't even come up in Google. They were there was a term for it, delisted, but that's not the right
Delisted.
word.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Unindexed or something, I think it is. But
Okay.
our campaign was not hit. Our first one, Battle Brick Road 1, wasn't. But
Mhm.
when we had the sign up going for book 2, and it was going good for a few months, and then all of a sudden you'd go into Indiegogo and search Battle Brick Road 2 and it wouldn't show up.
Yeah.
So I thought, all right, we're going to do this now, are we? So we put a lot of thought into it.
Mhm.
And we decided, you know what, let's go ahead and try our own website.
Mhm.
Obviously the Rippaverse, Eric July, they build their own and they do, well, it's not necessarily a crowdfund, it is a pre-order, but
Right.
it crowdfund like with the sales and numbers and all of that. And then my friend Michael Bancroft of his book The Lucent, he launched his own website, and he used the same platform, the Shopify platform. And I thought,
Mhm.
well, if it's good enough for Mike, it's good enough for me. So I had a lot of back and forth conversations with him about, hey, how'd you do this? What plugins did you use? And all of
Mhm.
this. And I just sort of took his website as a template and
Mhm.
kind of copied what I liked and changed what I think what maybe was a better fit. And so far, so good.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if Indiegogo isn't gonna, have my product searchable, my book searchable, then it's no different if I'm doing it on my own. So
True.
I figured, why not give it a shot? And then there are no platform fees
Mhm.
that we have to pay them.
Mhm.
That's more money in us to pay our talent and use to make the book better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the site. It's easy to navigate, easy to find things. Thumbnails are very clear. It's real clean. It's real simple. You don't scroll for days.
Mhm.
Everything has a purpose here, which I really like. Plus, you've got lots of samples of the interior artwork, which is great. Um, what's the deal with the vinyl? You've got this Battlebird Road
Yeah.
7-inch vinyl EP. I remember in the 90s, there was this resurgence. That was probably the start of the resurgence of vinyl and 7 inches. A lot of my buddies who were into
Mhm.
punk or into like Dick Dale or old school 50s bands, they would love to go and scour record stores for 7 inches. Why did you pick to do a 7 inch? And what's on the 7 inch?
Well, really, it's because it's a couple of things. One, a couple of other books that or friends of mine have made, or books that I've actually been a part of, have had music done for them, like just
Hmm.
like maybe a theme song that they would put in a trailer for their campaign trailer and things like that. And I thought I would really like to do that for Battle Brick Road. And when I'm drawing, when I'm doing layouts and penciling and stuff, I listen to a lot of music,
Hmm.
and it gets to that point where I want to listen to specific music because it sort of gets me in that Battle Brick Road mood. Like
Oh
this is
yeah.
the kind of music that if it were the movie, this would be the kind of soundtrack we wanted.
Oh yeah.
So that's playing in my head
Mhm.
as I'm drawing, and then I think, well, why don't we get a theme song for Battle Brick Road? And then, I'm collect vinyl records myself, so it was like, well,
Yeah. Okay.
what if we just did a soundtrack? So it's sort of like a little our foot in the water, a little
Mhm.
dip our toe in the water of doing that. There are 2 songs
Mhm.
on this, obviously 1 song each side of 7 inches that isn't a full record, but we have a theme song for Scarecrow and a theme song for Tin Man. And we hired, a synthwave artist by the name of Vosto.
Very cool.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's really the tracks are really, really they're amazing.
I love synthwave. I just think it's so funny to me that that's a thing, and
Mhm.
it's obviously influenced by the '80s and all of the synth sounds of the '80s that were so prevalent back then. And
Yeah.
it's just hilarious to me that that's what people are recreating. It's similar to, like, I guess probably in the '80s, bands that had a '50s vibe or a '50s feel,
Yeah.
because it's about the same time length that we're stretching back to. Doesn't feel like it to me, but
Not since we were the ones living it, you know?
I know, man.
Yeah.
It's just strange to me how you see these things come back around
Mhm.
and become popular again and resonate with people. And it's also kind of a testament to how bad music is these days, like popular music. That we're going
Yeah.
back to this stuff that
Yeah.
resonated with people back then. But I just think pop music in general back then was better and reached a much wider audience. And so many bands were trying to break into or have that pop crossover, whether it was Def Leppard or even Metallica for that matter. But I guess
Mhm.
that kind of came in the '90s with the Black Album. But this is very cool, and I love that you can go back and you've got bundles on here where you can go back and get the original issues, um, all of the different variant covers. It's very cool. Is Operation Zephyr? That's kind of the first Battle Brick Road, or is it the prequel?
Yeah. So it is in essence, it's sort of a grab bag of everything that went into making Battle Brick Road. So the
Mhm,
Operation Zephyr was our original title because it had
mhm,
the Oz, in the name, the OZ.
mhm,
We did back in 2018, we did like a 5-page ash can
mhm,
that we just just to kind of get the idea on paper, making sure that Zeb and I would like work well together as a creative team.
mhm.
And it was printed. Just we printed it at home, with 8.5, folded in half with a long stapler kind of thing.
Gotcha.
And we put that in there. We got it colored up as well. It originally was just black and white, and then that also has all the concept designs I did and
Mhm,
some behind the scenes stuff. We did all kinds of just sort of backup material that we wanted to put in, just but it in its own package.
mhm. Very cool. Yeah, I love this cover, and you did this cover, didn't you?
Yeah, that was my first full drawing of the team of
Mhm.
what eventually became Battle Brick Road.
Yeah, I love the creases too. It looks old. It looks kind of weathered.
Mhm.
It looks kind of like an old comic, which is really cool. It's a cool aesthetic to add to the image.
Thank you.
I think many of us who want to work in comics start out with the hopes of becoming a penciler or an inker. I certainly that was certainly my dream. But what made you want to get into lettering and trade dress and designing logos?
Uh, I had a similar dream. It was like, I want to be a penciler. Inking always scared me. I still don't love it. It's not my
Yeah.
favorite.
Hmm.
I'm a penciler at heart, but the lettering sort of, I guess, kind of fell into my lap. Earlier in the intro, you mentioned the books, the self-published books I've worked on, and the first one was Flying Fortress, and that's where I learned everything about making comics. Because
Hmm.
we did, it was all a grassroots, just kind of in our basement working on the book kind of thing, and you do everything from writing all the way to pre-press and
Hmm.
everything in between. And that included the coloring, which is where I realized that I'm not a big fan of coloring. But I would get done with coloring, and then it was time to letter the book, and then there was this, uh, I got more relaxed. I was able to settle in and kind of really work on the book, and the lettering, I guess, became almost like a comfort zone.
Hmm.
And maybe it's just because it was like, oh, I'm finally done with coloring. Let me get into lettering. It was very relaxing.
Mm.
But I realized it was something that I enjoyed doing. That's also the time when we were really like writing the dialogue, sort of Marvel style.
Mhm.
So a lot of the comic really comes together at the end. But
Yeah, it does.
I had done 8 issues of that, and I had sort of set comics down for 6 months to a year, and I thought, I think I'll move on to other things. But a friend of mine who actually it was Zeb. I didn't know it was Zeb at the time, but a friend of mine was looking for a letterer, and he posted it on Facebook. And I applied for the gig and got the job, and the artist was the one who posted it.
Mhm.
And Zeb was the writer, and I'm going through this script, and I lettered the book, and it was fine, and I got my paycheck, and I was happy about it. And then it was one of those things where it sparked again. It was like, I kind of like doing this. This is kind of fun, and they'll pay me for it. So it wasn't soon after that that John Malin was posting on Twitter about Graveyard Shift and how they needed a letterer for that book, him and Mark Bolton.
Mhm.
And I had just finished that gig uh, with that previous book. It was called Frankennaut. I just finished that, and then I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I emailed John the pay. There was a deadline and all of that. I emailed him a test page I did. Just pulled a page from the campaign. There was no dialogue or any
Mhm.
script or anything, so I just had to make it up. So I pulled lyrics from One by Metallica and just put those throughout the page, and turned it in and gave it that 90s Tom Orzechowski Spawn style, which is what they were looking for. So,
Mhm.
and that got me the job. And then that just opened the floodgates, because right after that, I talked to Richard Meyer about Jawbreakers, and
Mhm.
said, "Hey, I'd love to be a part of this." And I mean, those 2 books were 2 of the big books in, 2018, 2019, and that just
Yeah.
sort of opened the doors for everybody to be like, this is, they were saying this is our letterer, and then all of the DMs and emails started flying in. So
Right. So did you letter Lost Souls?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
That was my
Okay.
yeah, I think Lost Souls came out before Graveyard Shift, but I don't remember the timeline exactly. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
don't either. I'm trying to remember back then. I remember that summer really well. That was because I was busy. Um,
Mhm.
Man, that was a fun book to color. I really enjoyed
Yeah.
that. It was
Yeah.
so wild and off the wall. I love stories about mercenaries anyway.
Mhm.
So this one, was definitely in my wheelhouse. But yeah, it's crazy that that book came together actually pretty quickly, as I recall. Because I think as I finished colors, they were sending stuff to you, and you must have been working on, or maybe you were working on the inks, or working off the inks before. Do you typically do that? Do you like to wait for the colors to come in, or do you start lining stuff up with the inks?
I prefer to wait until the colors are in,
Hmm.
and to kind of letter everything all at once.
Hmm.
A lot of different books, they'll have different style choices, different font choices, and I can kind of settle in and get used to an artist's rhythm of their art when I'm
Hmm.
when I'm lettering. So I do prefer it that way, but I've worked the whole gamut
Sure.
of variations. From I've even lettered over pencils so that the inker can go in and make any kind of minor adjustments that
Hmm.
might need to be done.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if
Absolutely.
I can just get the final, because then it makes it easy for like sound effect colors and things like that too. I
Sure.
don't have to
Well, you're
go
probably
back
also
and change
looking
those.
for some cues from the colorist too, because I mean, these days,
Mhm.
you're not just dropping yellow into a text box. You're usually getting. It seems like the letterist these days getting a little bit more creative and making the lettering a little bit more cohesive with each scene and what's going on in
Yeah.
the book.
Yeah,
Which I,
absolutely.
yeah. Um, Lettering is an often overlooked part of the production of comics and graphic novels. And I think it can really make or break a book, no matter how good the artwork is. If you got bad lettering and it's stepping all over the art and it's not carefully placed and not taking into consideration things like composition, I think it can absolutely ruin a book. Why do you think lettering is so important to the creation of comics and graphic novels?
Um, well, I think that's the number one connection, I think, maybe outside of the art, that the reader has to the book. I mean, that's where your eyes are gonna go.
Mhm.
Um, it is a it is super important for a letterer to, one, I think, stay out of the way, stay out of the way of the art. And what I mean by that is to to know things about like your composition, your placement, reading order, and all of that. So you're not covering up important details, or being just sort of off the wall or in random places. I think that's super important. I think it also a good letterer will be um, tied in to the art style in a way. Like the art style dictates in might just be a small sense, but in sometimes it dictates greatly the style of lettering that I will pick. So if it's a super indie book and the artwork is maybe more cartoony or stylized, I don't want a rigid font choice. I don't want rigid word balloons. You want things to be as in line with the whole theme or style or
Hmm.
aesthetic of the book as you can be. And I think, if you don't have a grasp of being able to do that, then it can be distracting for the reader
Sure.
potentially.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm working on a book right now. We've been talking about fonts, and I think that even like you're talking about, even down to the fonts that you pick,
Mhm.
um, does it mesh well with the art? Is it cohesive? Right? Does it fall in line with the style? And what does it evoke? Is it a warm font? Is it kind of rigid and cold? It's often we don't think about these things,
Right.
unless you're actually creating your own book. And it wasn't until I started creating my own books that I actually started to focus on this. And even, 28 years working in the industry and being on the back end of the creative process. I mean, you've got writer, penciler, inker, and then you've got the finishing touches, which is the color and the lettering. And for some reason, I never really thought about it. I just kind of was focused on
Mhm.
my job and my focus. And then when you start creating your own books, you realize, wow, this is really important. And these are really important details. And if you screw this up, it's just going to be like dominoes. Everything's going to kind of fall down. So
Yeah.
those finishing touches are really important. And I think you want somebody like yourself who thinks about these things beyond them being just letters slapped on a page. Because I think oftentimes we take for granted good lettering. And then when you get bad lettering, it's kind of like, sometimes you don't really know what's wrong with the page.
Mhm.
Um, but that lettering can often, like I've said, spoil a really good page or a really good splash
Yeah.
page, or, it's interesting.
Absolutely. It can really ruin the experience for the reader if the
Mhm.
lettering is bad.
Yeah. Has lettering helped you become a better artist with your own interior books, your own interior artwork for your books?
I hope so.
Mhm.
Uh, I certainly think about it more in the planning stages and the layouts and all
Right.
that. So,
Yeah.
um,
Do you when you're
yeah.
when you're roughing stuff out, are you also roughing text boxes, balloons, kind of setting up placement where you want to put stuff?
Very, very loosely
Mhm.
because as I said earlier, we kind of Marvel method the dialogue. So, um, when the dialogue is in the script initially before I start drawing it, it is written, but it's always meant to be like the idea of what the character is saying and not necessarily word for word what the character is saying.
Kind of
So,
placeholder sort of thing.
yeah, yeah. So,
Gotcha.
and then we're able to go in and tweak things and move things around if necessary,
Mhm.
based on room. Um, and I think I really like that process anyways. I think it's one more trip through that creative exercise of how can we tell this story? And it's
Mhm.
like, you know what? I didn't leave enough room for a large balloon here, so we got to get creative. Are we going to just move the text into different balloons? Or are we going to trim it down and make it more concise or
Mhm.
whatever? So that's a fun part of that process.
Yeah, I've talked to Andy Smith and Sergio Cariello before about lettering because both of them went to the Kubert School, and that's one of
Mhm.
the things that they taught them as pencilers was be mindful of the lettering, understand when you're doing your layouts that these text boxes, these balloons are going to be somewhere in here, and you can either I think draw with that in mind and leave enough space, or you just kind of or you don't, and
Yeah.
then you're kind of forcing things in. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's a real delicate dance, and I think a lot of people think that even though there is this, kind of creative process that comics have that's collaborative, that it's not. I think the misconception is it's very loose, and I think a lot of
Hmm.
the times it's a lot tighter than people think that it is, and there's a lot of thought that goes into each panel and into doing panel work, not only from a standpoint of visual storytelling, setting up your shots the way that they should be set up from the standpoint of the type of scene, the type of story you're trying to tell, but then having room, comfortable room to where you can artfully place things to, like we talked about, they're not interfering with the storytelling. And that's a tough thing to do. A lot of it comes with just practice and doing
Yeah.
stuff and doing a lot of books and the learning process. And I'm sure you look back at Lost Souls and some of your early work and you're just kind of like, because I do
Yeah,
the
I
same
do.
thing with my stuff, man.
Yeah.
I'm my own worst critic. I go back and I'm just
Yeah.
like, why did I do that? And then I say to
Hmm.
myself, well, that's where I was at the time, and
Yeah.
those are the methods that I was employing. And now I'm doing things differently because I learned that there was a better way, or I've tightened up my process. So it's always this journey, right? And
Hmm.
I don't know if I ever want to get to a place where I don't look back at my old stuff and be like, oh man, that's why I do this now. That's why I
Yeah.
made these changes. And it's, as an artist, I think you're always hoping that you get better. And a lot of the time
Yeah.
that doesn't happen unless you screw things up or don't do things quite correctly the first time. So it's I'm sure some of those early books you're just kind of like, what was I thinking?
Yeah. Well, failure is the greatest teacher, I
It
think.
is, yeah.
So, in this medium, a lot of times our failures are public. It's like somebody can point out, they're all getting published and getting in front of people. So it's like, even if maybe the reader doesn't know it's a failure, like, oh, I'm going to do that better next time. I'm going to do
Yeah.
this better next time. So,
Yeah.
it is certainly there's a certain fire that gets lit. Like,
Mhm.
okay, all right, we're not going to make that mistake anymore, or whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you just tighten up the process.
Hmm.
What's your take on the overall health of the comic book industry right now, and where do you see the market heading in the future?
Oh, that's a great question. As far as like mainstream comics, I'll be honest, I don't follow them. I haven't followed them for a long time. I've been in this indie scene for quite a while, over a decade,
Mhm.
and that's sort of where I am most interested in. But I think what we're seeing, especially over the past 5 or 6 years, I think what we're seeing is a sort of maybe a breakdown or a decentralization of entertainment. I mean, I think that's everywhere, not just comics, but
Yeah.
I think we're seeing people moving away. It's going to be slow, but I think people are moving away from the big corporate things and maybe finding their niche, finding their hobby that they like. And normally, I think, sort of huddled into these smaller camps that aren't necessarily small, maybe in comparison are small, obviously smaller than
Sure.
mainstream, but
Mhm.
being in these, I think the indie scene has grown quite a bit, and that's comics and uh, games, video games, board games. We've seen a whole resurgence of creativity
Mhm.
from all over the place, and I think really it is um, it's like if you imagine a puddle on the ground and somebody has stepped in the puddle, and then all the water splashes out, but it's making other puddles.
Mhm.
So the water's still there, but it's spread out further, and there are other uh, there's more of it to go around, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think about the indie scene in the '90s with the Bad Girl craze, which was when I
Mhm.
got into the comic industry. I was calling for Chaos Comics at the time, and guys like Brian Pulido with Lady Death and Eve Lerney and Billy Tucci with She, they were selling millions of copies. It was insane. But it wasn't quite decentralized like it is today. You don't have, I don't remember the multitude of creator-owned properties back then. I think we have much more now, and people who, like you said, are either pros getting into their own creative own stuff or leaving the big two behind, or you've got
Mhm.
people who did it as a hobby and are now uh, bringing their dreams to fruition in publishing their own book that they've always wanted to do. And I think a lot of that is just the ability to do it with such ease through Kickstarter, through Indiegogo, or building your own platform. doing YouTube channels and whatnot to help promote it. I mean, a lot of that stuff just didn't exist back in the 90s,
Yeah.
and no amount of
Yeah.
guerrilla marketing back then was gonna be able to yield this many creatives, I think, doing their own thing. So like you, I think the future for the indie market, I think, is very solid. I think it's very hopeful and very bright, especially as Marvel and DC continue to publish stuff people don't want to read. So it's just going to push people out to the fringes or to the edges of the industry, where you're going to find creators who are doing their own thing and having just much more creative freedom to not only tell their stories, but tell stories that they want to, that they feel are important to tell.
Yeah. I think technology has played a big part of that too. It's just easier to get things done. It's easier to get things made. There's no gatekeeper on printers. There's no gatekeeper on colorists and letterers. And it's easy to find people to collaborate with, and to get your book out in front of people, whether you do it only online, have a webtoon or a webcomic, or print it up and go to conventions, or, there have been indie publishers that have pushed hard and made all the phone calls and written all the letters to get into Diamond and get into, stuff was happening in the early 2010s with, I think Comics Tribe did it. And, we've got Peter Samedi with Alterna, and he was able to build up what he did with them too. So
that's true.
Yeah, there's a lot of, if you've got the will, then you can make it happen.
Yeah. I even worked for Devil's Due Publishing, coloring G.I. Joe for a couple of years, and they started out at Image and then broke away, and then Josh formed his own company with Devil's Due. And I always thought of them as sort of an indie. It was such a small group of people. It was like 8 people in an office, and in Chicago, and it was a lot of fun. But it didn't feel like I was working for a big company. We were a very small company. We were this indie brand who had this big license to play around with, basically.
Yeah.
So it was, even then, it was fun, and we had all kinds of creative freedom. But it's not like today, where you can do whatever you want. And it's like you were saying, with technology, all of us are able to connect a whole lot easier. Otherwise it's like I'd have to find you at a con 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I'd have to literally bump into you or ask around. Do you know a letterer? Do you know somebody who can do this? So it's just so much easier to connect with people, and I think that's been a real blessing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Do you think more artists and professionals from the big two will get into the creator-owned market? We're seeing a lot of people recently bailing out of DC, guys like Francis Manipool, Tony Daniel. There's just so much going on. I was even looking at Rob De La Torre's work on Conan, which I think is, I forget who the publisher is. Is that Dynamite? I'm trying to remember who's putting that book out.
Is it Dark Horse?
No, it's not Dark Horse. It doesn't matter. I'll flash the cover so we know, so I can correct myself later. But there's so much amazing talent that used to be in the stable house at Marvel and DC, and now I think that they're noticing guys like you and me and others who are having not only success in the indie market, but also that we can do what we want. We can tell the stories we want. We're not hemmed in by 80 years worth of canon on some legacy IP. And I think a lot of these stories from these creators have been pent up. I think some of them probably should have been published through Marvel and DC, and they probably would have in different times. But now it's just sort of like the only real outlet for these types of creators to really do what they want to do, spread their wings, and just kick ass, is the creator-owned market.
I think I would love to see more big pros do their own stuff. I mean, we see that a little bit with obviously the names you listed, and I know, like, Greg Capullo has been teasing Creech, a return to Creech as well, which I think is really neat.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of artists and writers and other creators are. I think that they have the ability to do it in terms of talent. Some of them may not want to do the whole crowdfund thing. They may not want to do, because that's a whole beast on its own.
It is. That's a lot of work, dude.
Yeah, being your own creator and marketing department and PR and all of that. So
yeah, you wear a lot of hats.
it's a ton. It's a ton of work. But maybe like doing what they're doing with Ghost Machine, like
Yeah.
creating a collective of creators who sort of sailing away on their own own ship and still maybe staying in the sphere of all of that with going through image and
Sure.
going through and staying in the distribution network and all that, which is still good.
Yeah.
So there are varying levels that they could do. I'd love to see more people do it. And of course there are artists that maybe just don't want to. So that's cool too. You just want to stick, you want to do your time. You've loved Fantastic Four or whatever, that's all you care about doing, then go for it. But
yeah,
I think more stories out there, I think, is great. I think come up with new characters, come up with the new ideas. You never know what could happen.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I love the idea of it being, like you said, the range of choices that a creator has today. Kickstarter, Indiegogo, building your own site, doing YouTube, launching a bunch of stuff, creator-owned properties with Image or Dynamite. Going the traditional way. I mean, you can literally do anything now, and you can print anywhere. You don't have to print in China. There are great printers here in the US, and you're not waiting 4 to 6 weeks for your book to come on a boat. It's so wide open now. And I've never quite seen it quite like this before from the standpoint of the creative freedom and the options that all of us have in comparison to past indie scenes like in the 90s. That stuff just didn't exist back then, man. And it was much more of a kind of controlled environment. You kind of had to go through, jump through these hoops and go through these people back then. And that just doesn't exist today. And I would think that for creators at the big two, especially, that would just be really enticing. It just seems like it would be almost like you couldn't pass that up. So I think the future is bright. I look at Marvel and DC and I just say to myself, at some point in time, they're going to get tired of losing money and they could potentially turn things around. But then I say to myself, with all these creators, these big creators bolting, what are they going to have left when they do decide to turn things around? And what are they going to have to offer people to come back? And can they get people to come back? I don't know. It's an interesting time, though. That's for sure. In the future, I think the future is unknown, but the future is bright because there's just so much more the creators can choose from.
I hope so. I mean, I am an optimistic person too, so I also think it's bright. But there's no telling what could happen. I just think that where we are now with the indie scene, just growing as quickly as it is, I think it's all great.
Yeah, I mean, and it's growing fast, man. So
yeah.
What are your plans for 2024 as far as new projects and working on other books for other creators?
Right now, my main plan is finishing up Battlebrick Road 2. We are more than 50%, almost, I think over 60% done with the line art. And we're getting all of those pages, we're getting them colored up and really moving right along to hopefully get fulfillment started late spring, early summer this year. And fulfillment, that can take some time too.
Sure.
I do have other irons in the fire creatively at different projects that I've kicked around with some friends, some personal projects that I want to do. There's a sort of a sci-fi, horror sci-fi story that I want to do. I don't know if it's necessarily 2024, but it's been percolating in the back of my brain for quite a while and trying to figure out what that looks like. I have the end product in mind already. I have the end figured out. It's just
that's important.
That's important. Together. Yeah. So right now it's sort of all hands on deck with Battlebrick Road. I want to try and get that done as much and quickly as I can.
Very cool. And for those who might have missed it, where can they go to order it again?
Yeah, it's very simple. Just go to battlebrickroad.com. If you want to get a book right away, you can order the dinged and dented copies of book 1. We have a little section that says shop now, and anything you order, if you order it only from there and don't add anything from the actual campaign, we can ship that out right away because it's not tied to a book that's still in production. These are in hand and ready to go out the door.
Okay.
And that's Battlebrick Road 1. There are 2 covers, my cover and a beautiful cover by Kenneth Rocafort.
Yeah, let me show that really quick because I love Kenneth's work. He's just got such a signature style. This is great.
They are technically dinged and dented. They're just minor imperfections on the cover. We had an issue with the spot gloss being misaligned, and so we got to keep all those rejects, which was kind of nice. But,
nice.
We get to sell them at a discount. The quality of the paper and all that is perfect. The book itself it's a great story. But like I said, if you want to read it and get it right away, we ship those within 48 hours of your order. And you can be reading Battlebrick Road right away. And then book 2, like I said, we're in the middle of production right now, and we'll be shipping that out soon. We've got books and records and T-shirts and art books and all sorts of good stuff.
Yeah, you got all kinds of cool stuff on here. Cool merch. I love the 7-inch. I think that is such a nice touch. I haven't seen anybody do that. And like you, man, I mean, I listen to a lot of music when I'm coloring. It's usually instrumental. I've been listening to a lot of Toto from the Dune soundtrack from '82, which is just crazy good, man. It's so good.
Yeah.
I was also listening to the first Young Guns soundtrack the other day, which was kind of a one of a kind in the sense that originally they scored it with a regular symphony, and Chris Kane, who's the director, Dean Kane's dad, didn't like it, so they scrapped it and they decided to do a more modern rock kind of soundtrack with two guys, a very small production. They cranked it out in 2 weeks. And I go back and I'm just kind of like, wow, it's amazing. When you have a tiny little window, certain creatives can rise to the occasion and really crank something out amazing. You do more with less sometimes as a creative. And one of the things that I missed about the sequel to Young Guns was that great soundtrack, because they kind of ditched it. And I think they hired Alan Silvestri for the second one, and it was more traditional.
Oh, okay.
And I just felt like that first one was so MTV, it was so 1988 or 87, and it was just pitch perfect. But
I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that.
It's on YouTube, great. The whole thing. It's not on CD. I was hoping to get it on a hard copy, but it's not available anywhere for some reason. But somebody
gotta put it on vinyl.
I know. Yeah, exactly. That's a great idea. Sadly, we're out of time. Eric, go ahead and give everyone your social media coordinates so they know where to find you and what you're up to.
Pretty easy to find on X and Instagram. I'm at Eric_Weathers, or search for Eric Weathers on YouTube.
Awesome. And what's the best way our viewers can support you?
I'd say the best way is to go to battlebrickroad.com and back the project. That helps get the book out. It helps us make the book bigger and better for everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. We'll do this again. All right. For more videos like this one, tune in and subscribe to Bounding in a Comics channel on YouTube and Rumble. Also, make sure to like this video and leave us a comment. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time.